Led Zeppelin. A London-based hard rock band, Led Zeppelin was formed in 1968 by founding member Jimmy Page. After his previous band, the Yardbirds, split up, Page decided to form his own band, originally going to be called the New Yardbirds, and while searching for bandmates, John Paul Jones, who knew Jimmy from when they were session musicians together, suggested he join. He was soon accepted. Now looking for a lead singer, they called up an old friend, Terry Reid, and asked if he'd be willing to join. He got back to them with a solid maybe, in which Jimmy replied, either you're in now or you're out. Reid eventually had to say no. They then went looking through numerous small clubs and eventually came across a singer known as Robert Plant. Page was so blown away by his performance, he invited Plant to stay at his boathouse in the River Thames in England. They discussed their interests and discovered a shared love for the blues. Plant was now in, and with the only thing needed being a drummer, Plant convinced his good friend John Bonham, who played in a local dance band, to join. They were now what we know as Led Zeppelin. The first song they ever played together was Train Kept It Rollin' by Tiny Bradshaw. It was the first time Page and Jones heard Bonham's drumming and were instantly blown away. They finished the song and all looked at each other, where Jones is quoted as saying, "This is gonna work." Within 1 month after forming, they already had a full 2-hour set and enough original songs for a full album, while still being under the name The New Yardbirds. Rewind back a few years, in May of 1966, Keith Moon and John Entwistle from The Who recorded the instrumental Beck's Bolero with Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and Jeff Beck. The track came out well, and they talked about forming a new band. Moon allegedly said that the band would go over like a lead balloon. Page then remembered the joke 2 years later, took the A out of lead, changed the balloon to a Zeppelin, and they were now Led Zeppelin. With Jimmy's studio experience, he decided not to be produced by anyone but himself, the sole reason being he felt the producers he had worked with in the past wanted the songs to be less live-sounding and more record-sounding, where Page enjoyed the spontaneity of the live sound. They then started recording their self-titled debut album, Led Zeppelin, at Olympic Studios in London in October of 1968, and soon had the album released by Atlantic Records in the US on January 12, 1969. With the album having decent reviews in England, with critics being neither here nor there, the US immediately jumped on the new Led Zeppelin bandwagon, leading it to ultimately reach number 10 on the album charts. With songs like Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, Dazed and Confused, and Communication Breakdown, they previewed a new sound of rock and roll that other bands would soon follow in the 70s. Refusing to sell singles, the album was not widely available, but remarkably did very well. They toured the UK in early 1969, and that summer started their first American tour, which sparked their big breakthrough in the US. While touring, the band was simultaneously creating new material for their next album, and on October 22, 1969, just 1 year later, released their second self-titled studio effort, Led Zeppelin 2, which had their very first single, Whole Lotta Love. They rejected the concept of singles as they wanted the audience to hear the full album, so their manager went behind their back, releasing the Whole Lotta Love single to the masses. The reaction was overwhelming and provided the band a wider range of audiences, with the single topping at number 4 on the top 40 charts. 1 month later, the album hit number 1 on the US charts and in the UK in February the following year. The band never ceased to stop playing, doing tours as much as possible, and throughout 1970 toured back and forth from the US and the UK, and by mid-1970 already had more material for another studio album, Led Zeppelin 3, which was released on October 4th, 1970. With the success of Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 3, their more folk-oriented album, immediately charted at number 1 in the US, with the Immigrant Song single reaching number 15. Again, they started touring the Led Zeppelin 1, 2, and 3 songs, and by November 8th, 1971, released their most critically acclaimed album, Led Zeppelin 4, with songs such as Black Dog, Rock and Roll, The Battle of Evermore, Going to California, When the Levee Breaks, Four Sticks, and Stairway to Heaven. Pretty much the entire album, they were no doubt cemented in rock and roll history. Though the album only peaked at number 2 in the Billboard charts, it stayed there for the next 4 years. A year and a half later, after more touring and rehearsing, they were ready to release yet another studio album. Their fifth, and this time their first non-self-titled album, Houses of the Holy, was released on March 28, 1973. It would become their third album to chart at number 1, with classics such as The Song Remains the Same, Over the Hills and Far Away, The Rain Song, and Dire Maker, and more abstract songs such as The Crunge, No Quarter, and The Ocean. Houses of the Holy was a strong contender in the Led Zeppelin series. They then decided to record a live show with live-action cutscenes in between songs upon Houses of the Holy's release. The film was taped during the summer of 1973 and was comprised of 3 nights of concerts at Madison Square Garden in New York City, with additional footage shot at Shepperton Studios. The film premiered 3 years later on October 20th, 1976. The film showcases infamous Led Zeppelin moments such as the bow on the guitar during the song Dazed and Confused, and a 13-minute drum solo by John Bonham in the song Moby Dick, where the rest of the band is seen going backstage as Bonham bangs the crap out of his drums until they are cued to come back out and finish the song. Then, in 1974, Led Zeppelin founded their very own record label, Swan Songs, which would release all of their albums and would later sign bands such as Bad Company and The Pretty Things. And 1 year later, on February 24th, 1975, they would release Physical Graffiti, a 2-disc record and their longest album yet, with 15 songs on the album. Once again, the album hit number 1 within 2 weeks of its release, and with that, Led Zeppelin became the first band in history to have all 6 of their albums on the charts at once. They then went on to release Presence on March 31st, 1976, and In Through the Outdoor 3 years later on August 15th, 1979. They then toured the US one final time and did their unknowingly final tour of the UK. Led Zeppelin's last show ever played was in Berlin, Germany on July 7, 1980. Later that year, on September 25th, John Bonham had died from asphyxiation after consuming around 40 measures of vodka. About a week later, Led Zeppelin announced their disbanding in the wake of Bonham's death, and Led Zeppelin was to never create new music under the name. Though Led Zeppelin is now no more, the spirit of the music still stands. Page's rocking guitar, Plant's amazing vocals, Jones's grooving bass, and Bonham's unreal drumming. They were one of the best four-piece bands to ever be. In 1995, they were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and are now hailed as one of the greatest rock and roll bands in history. Robert Plant went on to start the Honey Drippers in 1981 and later joined The Firm with Page in 1985. Then in 2001 formed Strange Sensation. John Paul Jones briefly joined Them Crooked Vultures in 1999, and Jimmy Page created the short-lived XYZ with ex-Yes band members Chris Squire and Alan White in 1981 and recorded Outrider in 1988. Page has since retired. Keep on rocking.